So, together with my son, Kai Kellett, we are going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please, everyone stand up, rise. Over here, Kai. Hand it back. Okay, flag. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So welcome to the Settlement Project Seminar, and thank you so much for coming, everyone. And we want to start with the Star Spangled Banner. Youngju Sharf is going to sing for us. Youngju.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched are so gladly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, stay true through the night, that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Thank you so much, Youngju. Please sit. So welcome, everyone. And around the world, welcome. This settlement project was started, it was inspired by Dr. Frank Kaufman. And so I knew of him personally, but I didn't know so much about settlement. And I invited him to my local group, ACOR, Alameda County Committee of Restoration. We are in Alameda County in Northern California, right next to Oakland, California. We are the 4th largest county, and we're the 24th in the nation. We're in the belly of the beast. So, so I just want to really express my gratitude that all of you could come here today, because it really takes it takes character to be at the right place at the right time. So we are responsible for what we learn. That's the challenge. And I'm just so grateful that all of you who are channeled in here and also here today. So I would like now to really appreciate the place we are at. This is the Veterans Building in San Leandro, California. And I want to invite up right now the commander of the American Legion here, Commander Ron. Can you please come here? And we want to, my good friend, David Cantrell, he painted this. And we have sculptures. There's 2 sculptures of this in 2 of our capitals in America. And David gave this to me, and I want to give this to the veterans here and appreciate all that they did and sacrificed for us. So, Commander Ron, I'd like to give this to the Veterans Building here. Commander Don. Okay. So before we do, I'm going to invite someone to do our invocation. Now again, action is education. Education is for action. And I just want to bring someone up here who truly is acting on some dream and some reality of the breakdown in her city. But she didn't leave. She was tempted to leave, but she stayed. Sheila Thompson. Can you please come up? She's going to share shortly something about her desire to really help our society, and then she'll give the invocation. Please, Sheila.
Hello, everyone. My name is Salika Thomas, and I'm running for City Council at Large, which is Vice Mayor in Oakland. And I'm a Christian, and it's my duty to serve my community and people around me. I was called. I did not apply. Some angels found me from Some angels, they came and found me from the Alameda County Star Search. And they liked my politics. They liked what I stand for. I'm for enforcing law and order. And together, we can beat this spiritual warfare by praying, by running for office, by donating, by volunteering. We have to stick together. We have to come together with these pastors as well so that they can reach their congregation. A lot of people are voting for parties that they have been brainwashed to do, or it's been something that they've been doing because of what their families have taught them. But we need to start educating people and letting them know what is the real that's going on right now. And it's a spiritual warfare. They're trying to attack our kids. They are trying to attack our freedom. And we are in danger. So we have to stand up, we have to rise up, and we have to pray and keep God first, and everything else will fall into place. God bless. Huh? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would like to just bow your heads and please join me in prayer. Dear God, Heavenly Parent, thank you for this incredible opportunity to be together of people of like minds with a pure heart. Thank you for your pure love. This is what moves all religions in the ideal. And we want to be able to connect to that river of love, all the different streams and tributaries that go into the river, and the tide that rises is love. And we want to connect that. We want that as to be our basis. We want the Spirit to be here so that your truth can really speak to us and that we can do something truly impactful, like so many of our ancestors and those who sacrificed themselves so that we could be alive and we can make a better place. I offer this to you in all of our family names. Amen. Okay, thank you. So, we'd like to show a video to start out today. Okay.
A warning to America. 25 ways the U.S. is being destroyed in under 2 minutes. 1. Open borders and illegal immigration. 2. Rampant crime and unsafe cities. 3. Mass addiction and fentanyl. 4. Election insecurity and interference. 5. The educational indoctrination of children. 6. The asymmetrical weaponization of justice. 7. The destruction of private property rights. 8. Inflation and debt. 9. The global depopulation agenda. 10. Record low fertility and plummeting birth rates. 11. Unaccountable federal bureaucracies. 12. Toxic food supply. 13. Vaccine and pandemic disinformation. 14. The trans-contagion and sterilization of children. 15. Overprescription of pharmaceuticals. 16. Destruction of the nuclear family and parental rights. 17. DEI and the new racism. 18. Moral and societal decay. 19. The financing of endless foreign wars. 20. The sprawling surveillance state. 21. The centralization and consolidation of government power. 22. The destruction of trust in institutions. 23. The censorship industrial complex. 24. State media propaganda. 25. The smearing of those who challenge it.
Mission log 2050-01.
We are dead. And James Lindsay and Dennis Prager, Jordan Peterson, there are men like this that are really on the front line, really bringing insight and understanding. And in my experience, to be able to meet Frank Kaufman, to meet Dave Burgess, they have inspired me like these other men. And it's really a time that we really need to have that And I really feel that settlement project is like that rug, is this, come on, under this rug, and whatever you're doing, hopefully this will help you be more focused and take more responsibility and just feel that interconnectedness. Albert Einstein said, right, there's nothing by chance, everything has some connection. And for all of you to be here today, it's not by chance. There's some really, and that's for anyone who are channeled in here. Also, it's not by chance, so I'm really grateful that I'm sure taking time from some focus that you have, and that maybe you can have some opportunity to hear and to, maybe more deepen your commitment to help support peace in this world. So I just want to, while we have a moment here before we show the video, I want to invite up our Vice Mayor, just to say something short. Please, yeah. Brian Azevedo.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I wasn't prepared tonight. Thank you so much all for having me. Dr. Kaufman, thank you for your work. Mike, thank you for inviting me. Our Constitution is real important. It's been a debate for over 200 years. What does the First Amendment mean? What's infringing on someone's rights? The Second Amendment, what's the right to bear arms? So the Constitution is really important. So I'm here, excited to learn more, and thank you guys all for having me. Appreciate it.
I just want to mention that our local group here, we've been teaching the Constitution for the last few years, and we've been able to teach it the last week, a couple weeks. So we're going to, to be able to, it's the highest law of our land, and it's a beautiful document, and this is what we're holding on to right now. Our country is really more of an organized crime syndicate than it is, what our founders had hoped for. And Benjamin Franklin, I think he was 17 when he went to Philadelphia. My son is 17, and so we just have a perspective on what these men did, for us. And that's why I'm so grateful that we're in the Veterans Building here. You can see all the states are represented by flags, and they sacrificed. When people really think about other people, it's such a beautiful thing, and those are the people that you want to be around. And so America is really in a crisis right now, and you're going to hear this from our two speakers. And I just want to give you an overview real quickly about the schedule. So they're about 45-minute talks. Then we're going to have a question and answer for 10 minutes. And then we're going to have a breakout group, face each other and just have a couple pairs sharing. And then we can table that here. And so our program today is going to finish at 3:30, so we have a lot to jam in. So I'm going to have to be really tight with that where we move. We are going to have our meal here, and so I hope that all of you can be able to appreciate that. So just now I would like to invite up Nick Buskovich. He's a local. He's born and bred in California. He has worked in leadership for a long time, and I'm going to have him introduce our two main speakers. Because he's known them quite a while, and he's been working in the same type of area for many years. Nick Buskovich.
Thank you, Mike. I think first of all we need to give a big hand for Mike Kellett. This event wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for his enthusiasm, energy, and effort. So thanks, Mike, for having this.
Exactly
okay.
How I told you. Right.
I'm going to read. Well, I'll try to read. Our first presenter today, Dr. David Burgess, is the Education Director for the Settlement Project. Dr. Burgess received the Master's of Arts for International Studies in Comparison Religions and a PhD in Critical Theory from the University of Washington. Dr. Burgess serves as a founding literature and politics editor in the New World Encyclopedia since 2005. Dr. Burgess leads and has led several national and international organizations involved in social and political leadership, education, and mobilization, committed to interracial, intergenerational harmony and collaboration. Dr. Burgess currently advises the Settlement Project for a New America initiative in the areas of philosophy, ideology, and the academy. Those are all nice words. David's a really smart guy. He's got his PhD. Okay, I'm a doctor too, David, of humane letters. But more than that, I worked with David for 5 years in the business world. And he's a great marketing guy, but he's been working in America to bring back, to know, so we can know what the values that made this country great. There's a culture, there's values that make America great. And he's been working on this for the last 10 years, or I mean before that, trying to bring understanding to how we can become a great nation again. We're a great nation because of sacrifice. And I want to thank David for all his sacrifice in putting this together. So, thanks, David.
And Frank.
Am I supposed to do both?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I'm supposed to do both.
Yeah, just in general.
Okay, we have another. Both these guys are characters, actually. They may be doctors, but I know them as characters. So, Dr. Frank Kaufman comes from a long history of international peace leadership and a background in scholarly activism. In a later arena, he was a founding director and editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia Alternative New World Encyclopedia. Dr. Kaufman's experiences in the areas of war and the forefront of digital research led him to realize that a free and healthy future for all depends on American patriots turning back current forces hostile to Americans' founding ideals. Dr. Kaufman founded the Settlement Project in 2020 in response to a spike and clear open attacks on America, especially from within. Dr. Kaufman, through the Settlement Project, organized, writes, travels, eats, and sleeps the mission to protect, honor, and rebuild a strong and healthy America. Like my association with Dr. Burgess, more recently my association with Dr. Bergman. Again, these are nice words, and he went to school for a long time to get his doctor's degree, but he's been traveling literally the world, meeting with the Dalai Lama, meeting with, I think, one of the popes, I'm not exactly sure, to bring peace on earth, to bring religions together, all faiths. All faiths are, have their same ideals. So this isn't something that just recently they decided to put together. But I talked to David 4 years ago. They started working on this project. So it's a lot of effort, and I'm really excited today to be able to hear from both of them. So thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Nick. So I just want to mention you can't defend what you don't know. And so today you're going to hear some really very contemporary teachings that are really needed for our society, because our language today is really being hijacked. So that when you control language, then you really have it's really difficult. So thank God for the freedom of speech. So we are on the edge of losing America. So I want to invite up Dave Burgess to give us some understanding of this, and so that basically, if we can't define it, we can't defend it. So David Burgess for our first talk.
I'll be here. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. So, I guess I'm a little concerned. I don't have 25 answers to the 25 problems that we just saw, but what I do have, I hope, is kind of a background or understanding of the philosophical battle that's going on. Okay, not a politician. I'm an academic, right? So, but it's important for us to understand where this stuff is coming from. This morning's lecture is actually going to be about history, and it'll be, and it's okay. So this morning we're going to go back and look at the first two attempts to create a utopian society based on a secular philosophy. All right. Oh, okay. That was our deal. Okay. So the first part of this lecture will cover the French Revolution, and the second part will cover the Russian Revolution. We'll see that these revolutions share a basic structure that I hope will help us understand the current social justice or woke revolution that we're currently experiencing, right? If you wonder why we study this history, just remember the old saying, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So, as I looked at these different revolutionary moments, I see a pattern, right? And it's up on the screen. So, each of them begins by rejecting religion or God or absolute truth, absolute values, and then they redefine the problem and provide an alternative myth. And that new myth, gives a secular version of the origin of human nature and the origin of evil, the original sin, if you will. And then it provides a myth to address that and a utopian vision. And then, sadly, it turns out not everybody's on board. And so when they confront opposition, these people are redefined as enemies and eliminated, right? So anyway, we'll look at this. Actually, the modern era begins with Descartes and the cogito. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Why are we studying these old dead white guys, right? Why is it so revolutionary? Until Descartes, the Western world lived with God in his heaven, and God was the subject of the universe, and we were in the object position, his creation. Our task was to live in harmony with God's laws. But so prior to the Cartesian cogito, the medieval world was based on two pillars. One was the great chain of being, and maybe you've not heard of this before, but it was the medieval cosmology. The earth was at the center of the universe, and God was in his heavens, and there was a place for everyone in the world. Right? And the second truth was the divine right of kings, and the king was anointed by God and ruled on his behalf. And that was the world that Descartes grew up in. So we're not here to suggest that we should just go back and that world doesn't exist anymore. And look, the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, and under Louis XVI, France was in debt and falling apart. And yes, there was corruption in the church, although there were many good priests. But the medieval worldview, and this is the reason we're talking about Descartes, it was completely turned upside down by this philosophical statement. It said that the subject of knowledge, the guarantor of truth, was none other than the thinking person, the thinking thing, literally. So he said, but I can doubt everything, but I can't doubt that I'm the one doing the thinking. And that literally shifted not only philosophy, but the entire world. The order of dominion was reversed. The existence of God and every other truth then depended on man, on human understanding, not the other way around, right? So human reason became the new order of the day. The task then was to design a world based on human reason. the rationalist revolution. I mean, and this is the history of what happened, right? So, so they began to redefine God, in France in particular, right? That Descartes was, of course, French. And the order that was developing was based on this new rationalist thought, and especially the ideas of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau was not an atheist, but his supreme being was a deist. That is, it was the idea that the creator basically could be known through reason. It rejected the God of the Abrahamic traditions, right? So it's significant because if God is reason, and reason is God, it changes our understanding of what it means to be a human being and what the origin of evil is, right? So during the revolution, the more radical revolutionaries, and I wish this, we have to change this slide because the sign of the Festival of Reason covers up what is this wonderful old depiction of this celebration that took place. And it was a celebration for the goddess of reason. This is literally what happened during the French Revolution. And behind that you can see that there's a goddess, an idol, if you will, of the goddess of reason on a chair that they're parading around town, right, around Paris. So this was the extent to which they took this notion of reason, right? So they created this festival. It was very popular, by the way. And it was, of course, designed to replace the rites of the old Catholic Church there. So by rejecting traditional religion, then what Rousseau does is he creates his own origin story, right? What it means to be a human being. And I don't know if you've heard this term before, but actually it's not one he used, but it was used about his ideas, that human beings are like a noble savage, right? They were originally uncorrupted, good, if you will, in what's called the state of nature. They were innately good in their natural state. And this is where the idea of the noble savage comes from. But civilization had created laws for social organization which separated human beings from their natural, original, primitive goodness. So, having redefined what it means to be human, then Rousseau redefined the problem of evil. Evil is not a spiritual or religious question for him, it's a social problem. And of course, it is a social issue for all of us. The problem of evil lay not inside us in the human heart, in our own personal individual struggle with right and wrong, but it was the pursuit of one's individual interest that put the individual at odds with the rest of the community. So, and this is expressed in his social contract. He says, man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. So what is the cause of that slavery? Well, for Rousseau, the original sin, the founding myth, was that private property was that separated man from his original goodness. It's the pursuit of the own individual will, my own individual interest. And it led some people to accumulate more than others, right? It separated people, in his view. And so, and it served to separate the noble savage from the communal spirit, right? Its natural state of goodness. So Rousseau is actually responding to Hobbes, who had a very different view. His view, as is stated in the side, life in this state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, right? But what Rousseau says is that he's just, this is actually what civilization did to man. Man was originally good, but he's just reading back into the so-called state of nature, which of course itself is a myth, right? I mean, we don't know, right? They just this was their philosophy, their theory. So I just want to point out, that of course between Rousseau's innately good human beings and human nature and Hobbes's depraved human nature, there is a traditional view, right? That we are pulled between the spirit and the flesh, between the mind and the body, between the better angels of our nature and the little devil that sits on our shoulder sometimes. So Rousseau's philosophy rejected all this traditional view and redefined the problem of corruption as private property. So civilization, the system of laws and society that's built around that. So again, it's a social problem, not a moral one. So based on the new mythology, Rousseau sought to create a new utopian vision. For Rousseau, there was no way back to the old, original, pure, innocent, happy state. But it was possible to change society, to change civilization and the social order so that human beings, human nature could be perfected. The approach is one that would be adopted, frankly, by all the subsequent attempts to create utopia on Earth here that happened during the period of the Enlightenment and even until today. So it's not people, but society that must be reformed so that people can be good. Okay. And why are we studying this French Revolution? Because this is a pattern that exists with all these utopian philosophies, right? Society's the problem. Human beings will be good as long as we, remake society, right? So, but in order for that to happen, Rousseau argued for what he called the general will as necessary, right? How do you actually recreate society? How do you reform it? Since the individual had been corrupted by the pursuit of selfish interest, the pursuit of which he defined as private property, there would have to be some common cause, what he called a general will, which he said was, what's basically in the best interest of everyone, the best interest of society. Right? And this would be the new basis, the new reason, right, which would replace the old superstition of the church's philosophy and the old political order, right? So that is basically Rousseau's philosophy. The question then, of course, is what is the general will? How will we know what it is? Rousseau doesn't actually say. Somehow we'll all know it when we see it, right? But again, these are the ideas behind the rationalist revolution, right? But ideas themselves don't make revolution. Philosophers don't make revolutions. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. For ideas to make revolutions, they must first be turned into an ideology, right? So what is an ideology? This is actually a philosopher by the name of John Kekes, and this is his interpretation, which I really like. An ideology is a worldview that makes sense of the prevailing political conditions and suggests ways of improving them. Typical ideologies include, among their elements, a metaphysical outlook that provides a God's eye view of the world, a theory about human nature, a system of values whose realization will supposedly ensure human well-being, an explanation of why the actual state of affairs falls short of that perfection, and a set of policies intended to close the gap between the actual and the ideal. Right? It's this last component, a commitment to a political program and its implementation, that distinguishes ideologies from religious, personal, aesthetic, or philosophical systems of belief. Ideologies aim to transform society. Other systems of belief do not involve such a commitment. If they do, they become ideological. Right? So, again, this applies to all the things that we're going to be studying today. They all follow the same pattern. So the first ones to actually take a philosophy and turn it into a revolutionary ideology were the Jacobins and their leader, Maximilien Robespierre. You must have all be somewhat familiar with Robespierre. The Jacobins were the really radical political party during the French Revolution, and Robespierre was their leader. He was a strict believer in Rousseau, which is why we bothered to go through all of that. He was trying to implement the ideas of Rousseau. That was his stated goal, right? And he believed he was anointed to implement Rousseau's vision. That's actually a word that I think applies to him. He feels anointed. And it was left to Robespierre and the revolutionaries to take the ideas of Rousseau and turn them into a revolutionary ideology. So one pressing question remained: what's the general will? Well, since Rousseau doesn't have an answer, doesn't provide one, it was left to Robespierre to come up with that. If you're going to have a political program and you're going to lead, you've got to answer these fundamental questions. So his answer was this: as the leader of the Revolutionary Party, he was the one who was best positioned to decide what the general will required. Right? The general will is what Robespierre says it is. Right? This is the point in which we can begin to see the disconnect between this idealistic philosophy and the political ideology, and the breakdown between the two. So the revolution that was based, in their view, on reason and the general will, in reality, as in any political situation, it was grounded in the political struggle between the revolutionaries, and they represented the working poor of Paris, the so-called sans-culottes, which referred to their dress, their pants, actually. And it was a struggle between them and the elements of the old regime, right? So there was there was tension, there was friction, there was differences of opinion, as you might expect. But the Jacobins were clearly on the side of the working poor, the sans-culottes, and also the Paris Commune, which was their political organization in Paris. Excuse me. So their philosophy, based on Rousseau, rejects the traditional religious view of the infinite value of each individual. And I think this is important. This is fundamental. Good and evil is not based on any moral category, but whether you support the revolutionary cause or not. The sans-culottes were identified as the good, right? And the old clergy and the old aristocracy were evil. They were bad. So the government under Robespierre, they came up with this civil constitution of the clergy, and they required that the priests pledge their allegiance to the state and not to the Pope. Right? So, and they literally could be arrested, they'd even be executed if they refused to do so. This is actually pretty significant because as historian McAfee says, the civil constitution of the clergy is the moment which fatally fractured the revolution. In the end, it proved impossible to reconcile a church based on divinely ordained hierarchy with a revolution based on popular sovereignty. Right? And then, of course, in January of 1793, the revolutionaries executed the king, Louis XVI, and Queen Marie Antoinette, and they abolished feudalism. So the revolutionaries then, they created enemies both within the nation and with their surrounding nations as well. This led to civil war and also wars with their neighboring countries. Right? Again, this is all but with an attempt to base their nation on reason. So to address the rebellion within the country, they created the Revolutionary Army of these working poor, the sans-culottes. And they were charged with enforcing the will of the government and eliminating opponents. The question so many people ask is, how is it possible that the revolution and the revolutionaries committed to creating a government based on reason, not on tradition or superstition, could end up in the reign of terror? So to replace the superstition grounded in the Judeo-Christian mythology and self-interest created by private property, and to create a government based on reason and virtue, they label those who oppose them as tyrants, as enemies of the people, and they went about trying to eliminate them. So the revolutionaries said, so this is Kekes, who's one of my favorite philosophers, uncorrupted human beings just intuitively recognize and act in the general interest. So any divergence between an individual and the general interest indicates the individual's immorality and irrationality. If any individual fails to see that his true interests are the same as the general interest, he must be forced to act as if he did see it for his own good. And I would add to that, or be eliminated, right? And of course, remember, who determines what's in the general interest? It's the government, right? It's Robespierre. I hope you recognize a kind of pattern here, right? We're studying this because this is the first time it happens, but it's not the last. And even Robespierre, this is a quote from him. He was known, by the way, as the virtuous in the revolution. Right? But at the height of the terror, he says, without virtue, terror is deadly. But without terror, virtue is impotent. And also, terror is only justice, prompt, severe, inflexible. It is an emanation of virtue. Right? There's another quote too. We must smother the internal and external enemies of the Republic or perish with it. Now, in this situation, the first maxim of your policy ought to be to lead the people by reason and the people's enemies by terror. So the reign of terror wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature. Right? It was built in from the beginning. When each person, I might add, does not have the infinite value that comes from God, but is only considered valuable based on their ability for reason, then good and evil is simply decided by whether you're on the right side or not. And eventually, they all turned on each other, of course. Not surprisingly, people like a shopkeeper could be executed for selling sour wine because somebody accused him of being anti-revolutionary. Of course, you recognize there's an incredible potential for abuse of the system, right? And frankly, in the end, the revolutionaries themselves turned on Robespierre because he was eliminating all his political enemies, right? And finally, they eliminated him. And there's this great quote from this was from a revolutionary. He was a member of a different party, the Girondins, who was executed by Robespierre. He says, "It is to be feared that the revolution, like Saturn, will end up devouring its own children." Which is exactly what happened. So again, we're back to the same slide, the same point. Right? Once you eliminate God and redefine human nature and redefine what's good as what's in line with what the government wants, then anybody who doesn't agree, well, what do you do with them, right? Historically, that question is answered in this way. They are identified as enemies of the people, enemies of the government, enemies of the state, and they have to be eliminated. Which brings us to the next instance of the attempt to create a utopian society on Earth. Right? This is one, we're a little bit more familiar with. Some of us are old enough to have lived through some of the struggle between the West and the Soviet Union. Others of you, if you're not old enough, God bless you, good for you. Because it was awful, it was ugly. But the same exact pattern applies, right? Let me just go back. The same exact pattern applies in the Russian Revolution. So, first of all, Marxism was atheistic. Actually, between the French Revolution and the rise of Marxism, there were a number of developments, right? The French Revolution ended in 1794. Marx arose to prominence in the latter half of the 19th century, right? So by that time, deism had fallen out of favor. It was more of an 18th century idea. And frankly, atheism had replaced it. The idea of creating a society based on rationalism also had fallen out of favor. It had failed miserably, right? So Marx came up with, he was inspired by the French Revolution, but he came up with his own vision based on a different ideology. So after after the failure of the French Revolution, the critics of religion, they became full-blown atheists, right? And Marx, of course, famously considered religion as the opiate of the people, right? He openly expressed hostility towards God and religion, but beyond his own personal antagonism, he viewed it, and I think viewed it quite rightly, as an anti-revolutionary force, right? If you believe in morality and traditional concepts of right and wrong, you won't participate in the kind of violence that he advocates, right? He sought to replace religion with a new kind of secular system based on now materialism. Materialism replaced rationalism as the basis for the revolution. Right? So where did this come from? After the Napoleonic age, which had replaced what was the debacle of the French Revolution, there was a young German philosopher named Hegel who attempted to create a new philosophical system that he entitled idealism, and it was a combination of rationalism and empiricism. He tried, in other words, to find a unified system of philosophy. And in that system, in his social theory, he saw history as the working out of spirit through human history to come to its ultimate conclusion, right? So there was a goal of history, and that was spirit coming to know itself. So there's resonances here of the Christian faith, of the Holy Spirit, but it's also a philosophical term as well, and because he tries to create a unified system, right? So this was the world in which Marx grew up in. And Marx, of course, was profoundly influenced by Hegel and adopted his theory of history. But he argued that Hegel had it backwards. He had it upside down. So it was materialism, not idealism, that drove history. And he famously said that he found Hegel on his head and turned him right side up. Actually, the quote that everybody quotes is the exact opposite, but it's wrong. That's not. So that everybody says that he turned Hegel on his head, but actually he said he found him on his head and turned him right side up. So he replaced the Hegelian mythology with one of his own. And you may be familiar with this term of historical materialism. What historical materialism basically means is that history began with people in poverty, but they were also equal. They were all equally poor. And he called this state primitive communism, which even by its name, it suggests that the ultimate conclusion of history should be a mature communism, right? So this founding myth replaces the rationalist founding myth, which had replaced the Judeo-Christian one, right? So Basically, there were scarce resources, but everyone was equal. So according to historical materialism, the solution to the problem was division of labor. And it allowed for the creation of wealth, which was a good, right? And, as we recall, Rousseau had believed that private property was the original sin. Actually, Marx doesn't entirely disagree, but he just views it as a necessary evil in order for wealth to be generated, right? So the outcome produced wealth, but it also produced unequal development and inequality, right? Which is what he takes on to resolve in his theory. The problem is, of course, it creates classes. There's a ruling class who are oppressors, and they exploit the labor of the working class who are oppressed. So the inequality of the classes is the new original sin in Marxism, which could only be overcome through violent revolution by the working class. So the goal of history was achieving ever greater material well-being. Like Hegel, this process necessarily took place through conflict. And Marx called this dialectical materialism. The dialectic and the dialectical struggle was part of Hegelian philosophy. But Marx, of course, combines this with his own materialist philosophy, right? So instead of spirit working its way through human beings to know itself, the material revolution was material coming to realize the just society. So he has his new mythology. Naturally, he also then redefines what it means to be a human being, right? All history is nothing but a continuous transformation of human nature, according to Marx. Essentially, men begin to distinguish themselves from animals as soon as they begin to produce their own means of subsistence, a step which is conditioned by their physical organization. That's a quote from his book, The German Ideology. So human nature, like in Rousseau, isn't fixed. It's not based on any immutable characteristics that you have, but it's based on society, right? You are a product of the society you grow up in, and most specifically in Marx, you're a product of the means and relations of production, okay? So essentially, human beings are created by their environment, right? All ideas and relationships are products of the mode of production in which you live in. Also, his views were influenced by Darwin as well. So it's important for him and for all these revolutionaries to believe that human nature changes in this social and historical context, because if it doesn't, then their philosophy that you change society and human beings can be perfected isn't possible, right? So we're just some lump of clay, right? And we're being shaped by the forces around us. So since human nature is determined by the economic system, good and evil cannot be applied based on moral principles. In fact, for Marx, moral principles are nothing but the values of the ruling class that are imposed by those that are ruled, they rule, excuse me. They are designed to maintain the status quo of the ruling class. So good and evil depend on whether actions promoted by the revolutionary aims of social change. Excuse me. Marx instead argued that good and evil depended on whether actions promoted the revolutionary aims of social change. Good and evil is, again, which side are you on, right? So if you're on the side of the working class in a revolution, that makes you good in his system. And since we're products of our environment, good people are created by good societies. So we can't be judged based on our actions until we come from a good society. Then we'll be good, right? So what is the utopian ideal of Marxism? You guys have heard this before, from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs. So how does this utopian ideal be realized? As we saw in Marx, it is through conflict, right? So Marx's theory, here's what Marx predicted. The working class would achieve class consciousness. And what does that mean? It means they'd become aware of their role in history, their role in creating this utopian future. They would rise up and overthrow the capitalist class. And that would usher in a class of society that would achieve the goal of historical materialism, eliminating the history of inequality and oppression, right? That's the theory. That's what he believes will happen. But it never happened. Somehow, these workers, proletariat, never achieved this class consciousness, and in fact, what they did was they created trade unions, and plumbers make six figures today, right? Within capitalism, right? So, Frank, we're in the wrong business, right? So, rather than overthrowing capitalism, they made it stronger. So the revolution never happened as it was predicted. Right? And while class conflict has existed, it never created anything like what Marx predicted. So that created a huge problem for Marx and for Marxists. And lots of people who came after Marx, spent a lot of time trying to figure out, how do we get the working class to do their job, right? So, the point of this slide is that, so there's socialism. That was supposed to be the interim step that the working class would create, and then it would evolve into communism. But in fact, for revolution to happen, something different had to happen. It was supposed to be a stage after socialism, but instead, what communism became was synonymous with a system of state control and state power. So how did that happen? Well, it happened because in Russia, in another failed monarchy, Lenin and the Bolsheviks were able to seize power from a weak provisional government, and they implemented their own unique version of the Bolshevik Revolution. And so, like Robespierre and the Jacobins, they took Marxist philosophy and they created a revolutionary ideology. As I mentioned before, the philosophers don't make revolutions; revolutionaries do. So, and their party, Lenin saw that based on the failures of Marxism, this spontaneous uprising isn't going to happen. And what's needed instead is a vanguard class, a very highly disciplined group of revolutionaries who would seize control and make the revolution happen. So, in fact, Lenin was very much the new Robespierre. Like Robespierre, Lenin became the last word. He was the authority on what Marxism meant and what Marxism entailed, right? So basically he ruled. Like the Jacobins, they faced internal and external opposition. They had civil war and they had war with neighboring states. This is like, anyway, easily predictable. And so they created class enemies. The only difference is that in Marxist philosophy, they already had this notion of a class enemy, right? So they learned from the French Revolution and they included it in the theory. So they also attacked and destroyed churches and the old nobility. Again, it was supposedly the old bourgeoisie, but this was not a capitalist country. Anyway. So like the Revolutionary Army of the Jacobins, they created a plan to deal with internal dissent. They created enemies of the people, enemies of the state. And they created the secret police. It was originally known as the Cheka. Most people would later come to know it as the KGB. It was a predecessor. And they served to eliminate the class enemies, right? And of course, later on, they created the Gulag system. So the materialists were even more harsh than the French rationalists. There was no talk of virtue here, but a clear sense of what had to happen to class enemies. Grigory Zinoviev was one of the key people in the inner circle with Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin and a couple others that kind of ran the system. He says, to overcome our enemies, we must have our own socialist militarism. We must carry along with us 90 million out of the 100 million Soviet population. As for the rest, we have nothing to say to them. They must be annihilated. Actually, he underestimated. It was more than 10 million. And then this is another chief of the Ukrainian Cheka, right? We are fighting, we are not fighting against single individuals. We are exterminating the bourgeoisie as a class. He said, do not look in the file of incriminating evidence to see whether the accused rose up against the Soviet with arms or words. Instead, ask him to which class he belongs. What is his background, his education, his profession? These are the questions that will determine the fate of the accused. That is the meaning and essence of the Red Terror. Actually, it was a little before then, but that came shortly thereafter. They starved the Ukrainians when they tried to collectivize the farms. That's a whole other episode that came later. But the same idea is behind both, right? If you oppose the state, you get into line or you get eliminated. So Marx had argued, of course, that this state was supposed to wither away. But far from withering away, the Soviets, especially under Stalin, built the largest state apparatus in the world. The largest apparatus of state power and control, and they controlled every aspect of life. This is a remarkable quote from Stalin. Yeah, we are for the withering away of the state, and at the same time, we stand for the strengthening of the dictatorship of the proletariat, which represents the most powerful and mighty of all forms of the state which have existed up to the present day. So that he's both for it and against it. The highest development of state power, with the object of preparing the conditions of the withering away of the state, that is the Marxist formula. Is it contradictory? Yes, it is contradictory. But the contradiction is a living thing and wholly reflects the Marxist dialectic, right? Which means that based on his dialectical understanding, man, anything goes, right? And it did. So for Stalin, anyway, this one's, this is a perfect description of Stalin, right? Oh, I went back, sorry. I went the wrong direction. And then, this is another very famous quote from Stalin, right? The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. So, as we recall, liberty, egalite, and fraternité, which was the motto of the French Revolution, it ended in the Reign of Terror. It killed tens of thousands of people. Peace, land, and bread was the motto of the Bolsheviks. It ended in the Gulag archipelago, which killed millions. So, we're back to the same slide and to the same pattern. And we did all of this. It's fascinating history to me. I hope it's interesting to you, right? But it's a pattern that exists with all these secular philosophies that attempt to create utopia on Earth. And it's prelude to what we will study this afternoon, which is the kind of current revolutionary moment that we're in. So I would have to say thank you for your attention, and on from here.
Thank you, Dr. Burgess. So we're going to take a break for 10 minutes and come back, and then we'll have the counter-proposal with Dr. Frank Kaufman. And so then we'll have question and answers at that time. So just my comment here is government will never correct itself. So we the people here, we have the peaceful and lawful way for the restoration of our republic. So let's take a 10-minute break and come right back. Thank you. Jennifer just went to our Constitution class. Yeah. So Jennifer, you just finished doing our Constitution class, right? With
Yes.
ACOR, Alameda County Community Restoration.
Yes.
And now you're here at the Settlement Project, which is really like a tent that's really embracing all people, really seeking peaceful ways for a better world, for a better country, actually to be global citizens, right? Or global patriots. How about that? But if you don't love your country, you can't love the world.
Yeah,
we
have to
love our
start
country.
somewhere.
Right. So, what was your experience in our teachings of the Constitution?
I learned more here in 2 weeks and 2 Saturdays and 6 hours than I have probably in the last 25 years of my life. It was exciting. I was dreading coming in at first because it was an all-day class and it took up 2 Saturdays, but it went by so fast, and I felt when I left here that I had the knowledge that I needed to get out and to not be so afraid to talk to other people. I love that this is open to everyone. You don't have to be this wing of the bird, that wing of the bird. It's just it's we the people, and that's what we need to get back to, and fighting for our values and what's important that makes us America.
Dennis Prager is really big on that.
Yeah.
To have the values, right?
Right.
And Thomas Sowell, he's an amazing man. He said, that there's statistics, and then there's lies, right? So there's a lot of different things out there, right? But right now the world is like America. Right now, I think 90% of young people, according to statistics, are not even interested in any of this.
Right.
They're just into their career. And
They're our
everything.
futures. That's the hard part.
And then you got 90% of people invading our country that are like fighting age men. There's something to really think about what's
The
going on,
time
right?
is now. It's scary. We've got to get together and act now.
You have been in the Republican Party, taking leadership for a long time, and not really understood our own Constitution. This is a problem.
Guilty.
Yeah, so that's why what you don't know, you can't defend.
Right.
All right?
Right.
So
I
that's why
carry
we
the
teach.
Constitution around now in my purse, so I'm always, I'm got it ready and I'm ready to fight.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll get one line out of that.